So what's happening in the UK, for those that missed it, I've been talking about this a lot recently because I think things are potentially about to move in a good direction in the UK, is that Labour is really far ahead in the polls. Labour are the socialist neoliberal party in the UK, and certainly the socialists and neoliberals support them. And but the Conservative Party, who should be within 5 points of them, perhaps ahead, perhaps behind, are, by one poll I saw, about 25 points behind in the polls.
Because they suck.
We will get to that. You're right. We will get to that in more detail. I want to give the broad strokes. The Conservative Party in the UK it's partly Brexiteers, true popular Conservatives like most of us, but it's also a lot of them are just neolibs, neocons, like rhinos in the US. It's a pretty similar bunch. And through many things that happened, including since Boris, Liz Truss was the next leader after Boris, but she was immediately kicked out the party.
Yep.
And many believed that it was deliberate sabotage by an establishment who recognized that, wait, she's not a neolib, neocon, a Chino, a conservative in name only, just like us. We'll do everything we can to make sure that she's ejected from the party. It turns out now that she actually is a sort of popular conservative. She was speaking at CPAC. She's sitting next to Nigel Farage. She actually has impressed me recently. But then after her, you get Rishi Sunak. Rishi always seemed like kind of a nothing person, kind of an empty suit. And he has been accepted by the establishment. So I think he is much the Chino or a wet Tory that we don't want.
Sure. Yeah.
And I believe the establishment has underestimated the potency of the Brexit, the pro-Brexit, nationalist, popular conservative side of the Conservative Party, because now pretty much all of them are no longer supporting the Conservative Party. And that appears to be the main reason, if not the only reason, for the Conservative Party being 25 points behind Labour in the polls. This message to the establishment of the UK is, I think, gradually being received by people like Rishi Sunak and others behind him. And now a third party, Reform UK, which seems to be much more favourable to what we actually want, is by, again, some polls, only 7 points behind the Conservatives, a year out from the election. And Nigel Farage is supporting them. Liz Truss has said nice things about them. Many other good politicians are there, and they support many of the things that we want. So it's very possible, I think, that in the next year, either Reform UK could, and it sounds silly, but could genuinely become the second party of the nation, especially if they get some good superstars to join their party. We don't have a Trump here, but we have some decent people anyway. Coming back to the UK politics, but this is a poll that I found very positive. So new poll identifies a mystery X-Factor leader who can save the Tories, but who is it? And ignore the wording here, because you'll understand what's wrong with the way they describe this. They did a study where they proposed 3 hypothetical candidates, which they have here. Candidate X, on the right of the party, supports Brexit, wants to reduce immigration, would scrap net zero policies and take a tough line on trans issues, banning them from women-only spaces. So candidate X is the popular conservative, is the actual conservative. Candidate Y, supported Brexit but wants higher immigration, is reluctant to cut taxes and does not think children should transition gender. So that's more middle-of-the-road wet Tory, like Rishi. And then candidate Z, from the left of the party, voted Remain in 2016, wants high immigration, would not lower taxes, supports net zero policies and thinks children should be able to question their gender. That is not a conservative, that is a Labour candidate. In fact, it's relatively close to the left of the Labour Party, let alone the Conservative Party. So given these 3 candidates, across the entire country, now not just Labour, not just Conservative voters, but the entire country, candidate X, our guy, got 34%, Y got 19 and Z 22. So our ideas, according to this poll, are 12 points more popular than the leftist ideas, and those are 3 points more popular than the middle of the road ideals. And if you
the problem with polls like these, just saying, is the idea is, yes, people, you ask them on a poll, you say, how do you feel about XYZ idea, right? And they'll say, I don't like this, I like that, I don't like this, etc. Then when they go to the polls, it's still social identity.
Yes,
I
agree.
Not the issues.
I agree. That's what I thought you were going to say, and that is true. They mentioned that in the article. But this, I think,
predicted it.
this is an indication of what's going to be true, I think. because that social identity will break down in the face of reality gradually.
Maybe, but it depends. It depends on how core it is towards the sense of self. So it's a social penetration theory. It depends.
Okay. So that's across the entire country. That's already very encouraging. So if a lot of those people who say they'd vote candidate X instead just vote Labour because their family does, that's a shame. But that is an indication that if they're given something really good, then they will switch. All it will take is enough of a lure to vote for what they want rather than what they feel they have to. And they are likely to switch. And even again, over time, they're likely to switch as well. But that's across the entire nation. If we look now at people that have voted Conservative once, 49% vote for the pro-Brexit, our guy, candidate X. Candidate Y is 20%, candidate Z 13%. It's still weird how high the other two are, but 49%, almost the majority, would vote for our policies of just people that have voted Conservative once ever. That's, in my opinion, very, very encouraging.
It's avoidance of cognitive dissonance. It's internal consistency stuff. But if you get them to change, so I always repeat this. There's three ways that you can deal with cognitive dissonance. That's when your current actions don't align with your beliefs or your past actions, right? That creates psychological pain, which actually manifests in the area of the brain that is identical to the area that feels physical pain. So you have three options. You can either change your opinion. That one's really hard. You can deny that you ever had the opinion. I think that's what most people do. In this case, they have to be like, no, I never felt that way. Or you can ignore it. I think most people are seeing that they can't ignore it because of the pain in their wallets and the pain in their lives. Can't be ignored.
So that could be what's causing X to get so many votes here, yes. But I think it's probably also some positive things as well, though that's more the case in the US. We haven't done enough here to make it positive. But with the Y and your Z candidates, it could be that they would feel cognitive dissonance from voting for them, even despite the fact that they're voted Conservative once. But again, this is only voted Conservative once. There's maybe people who are currently Labour voters, but who voted Conservative once in 1990. So even that is very encouraging. But then it continues. The results are even more stark among Tory voters from 2019 who abandoned the party, with 59% returning if X was the leader, 20% with Y, and 6% with Z. So about 60% of people who are no longer voting Tory are doing so specifically, it seems, because they are too wet. So that's, again, very encouraging. In getting Reform UK voters to back the Conservatives, a massive 80% would back the Tories with X, 9 with Y, and 2 with Z. So this is very confirmatory of what I believe is the power of our kind of people in the UK. It's better hidden than in the US. In the US, it's been much more volatile and bombastic. And of course, you've had Trump, who is a great beacon for this stuff. We haven't had a Trump here, really. But the same sentiment among the public exists. And it's a very powerful
Boris
part of the
right. Try to be.
Yeah, he did, but it didn't go too well.
No.
There's still a very powerful sentiment among the public here. And I think they're just waiting for an opportunity to express it. And every time since Cameron left office and Brexit became the pursuit, every single time that they have then voted Conservative, those of us who are pro-Brexit and anti-immigration and pro-nationalist and all this stuff, we have voted Conservative because they seemed to be willing to do what we wanted. And then they didn't. Sometimes they did some of it, which is, not to ignore, but they didn't do enough. And now with Rishi, we just lost that confidence. With May, initially we were confident she would do what we asked her to do. With Boris, initially we were confident. Even with Truss, some people were. And with Rishi, it's gone. He's too much of a wet Tory. He's too much of an establishmentarian. He does not inspire that confidence. And so 15 years of waiting for the Conservatives to do the right thing have just collapsed. And that's why they're so behind in the polls. And Reform UK is taking most of that slack, and the remainder is people that just aren't voting at all. And I suspect that there's a massive proportion of people that would vote for a decent right-wing party who just aren't in the polls at all right now. So Labour being this far ahead, I think, is completely explained by this theory. And what it means is that in the next year, we could, especially with Tories' desperation, we could see a rapid realignment of the UK right towards something a lot more useful. It's less than a year to the general election. And
it's looking hopeful, though, so...
Yeah. So this is the first time in years I've had some hope for the UK. First time since about 2019.
Because the people can feel it. in their wallets. They feel it in their everyday lives. I mean, Jesus H. Christ, go to the shops and see how expensive everything is. I mean, or just the absolute state. Callum did that great video about a year ago from Lotus Eaters, where he just went from the most British town in the UK to the least British town. And that's something that people have to live with every day, here, of living in, you are in occupied territory in your own nation. You are in Britain, and it looks like Pakistan. How did that happen?
Many places like that, yeah.
Yes.
We do have the Galloway Story Park, yeah. There are places that aren't like that still, and that needs to become the norm. We need to reconquista Britain.
I mean, I've been to where you're at, which is lovely and beautiful and scenic, but and there's other places that Callum went out to some island,
to be fair though, Aiden, to be clear, I took you to the nice part of town. Okay. There are unpleasant parts of town as well. Where I live is, it's in a sort of not great part of town, just the streets around where I am now, but just beyond that, it's okay. So I've got sort of all perspectives available to me from where I am. Not the extremes. It's not as bad as some places, but I have also lived briefly in Luton, so I know how bad it can get. I'm sorry. Yeah, it wasn't good.
Yikes, bro. I mean, I was shocked. I was shocked both when I went to Swindon and went to Birmingham about just the absolute state. I mean, there's parts of Birmingham that were on the outskirts that were nice, but even when we were in the kind of more inner city where things are supposed to be, not the inner city in terms of the worst part, but decent part of Birmingham, it was still it felt to me like I'm in Baltimore. And that's how it felt to me, and I was so taken aback by that. And Swindon is a shithole. Oh my God!
It always
I couldn't believe it.
Fair, but actually, I don't know.
I was shocked at the absolute state of Swindon. No, that's not what Carl said about it when he said because he grew up in Swindon. He said it used to be fine. It used to be quite nice, but I mean, Jesus Christ! It looks like like the apocalypse came and went through it.
Well, the biggest concern because I always talk about democracy being able to fix these problems, and I think it can, but the biggest concern about that, same thing in the US, but possibly worse here, is that you get enough people who hate your country voting, that can actually ruin it, because my professions for democracy, my promotion of it relies on the people of the country being of the country, actually liking it, being British in this case, and being American in the US. In the US, it's a lot more effort to change that because it's just more of you. And there's not as much wrong but legal immigration in the US, unfortunately, than there is here. Here, in fact, I think there's more legal immigration, which is regardless wrong and shouldn't be happening, especially of Muslims. And so that will skew things. Certain areas of the UK are already becoming essentially Muslim controlled, not just on the streets, but in the MPs and the politicians as well. So we don't just need to stop the enemy's momentum. We need to then reverse it and mass deport millions of people who shouldn't be here.
There are, again, going back to that video Callum did, there are towns in the UK that are 100% non-British. Not a single British person lives there. They are Muslim enclaves. That's insane. That's unbelievable to me. Now, there's places like Dearborn, Michigan, in the U.S. that are 99% Muslim.
Yeah, but not
so
nearly
it's not
as
like the U.S. is.
Yeah.
There's more in the UK, and that is
in the
horrifying.
U.S. which are almost 100% Mexican, I expect.
Sure. But I think the difference is that I'll say this. This is my in defense of the Mexicans, right? Even though we got to send them all back, and build a big beautiful wall. At least Mexicans are Christians. Do you know what I mean?
They are a lot better than Muslims. Yes.
They have a shared moral system. Muslims see you as the kuffar. If you are the infidel, you are fundamentally different from them and cannot assimilate to their culture. They will not assimilate to yours. At least the Mexicans are Christian. At least they're Christians, and we have something in common culturally that we can agree upon. I mean, even if a lot of they come here illegally, but
they originate from Europe, Spain. But speaking of Spain,
their culture does. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Spain, the don't forget, it's not over. No matter how bad it is in the UK right now, it could get to the point that it is, but it doesn't have to be, because Spain used to was completely dominated by Muslim invaders at one point, and only a small portion of Spain at the north end was still Spanish. But then they reconquisted it. It can be done, even in the modern day. It can be, and the tools these days might be more cultural, or they might end up being more physical. But it doesn't have to be a civil war. But even if it does come to that, perhaps that is what's necessary. Either way, it is possible. And if you lose confidence, if you think, well, the UK's done, I'm just going to give up, you are doing nothing but helping the enemy.
Don't get too black. I've been very blackpilled at points in time. That's the point, though. They want you to get blackpilled.
Yeah.
That's why they do all this media crap, right? Is to make it seem overwhelming that everyone agrees with us and no one agrees, and you are on the fringe. You're some fringe lunatic. Now, to be fair, I'm a fringe lunatic in terms of being an American monarchist, but that's fine though. I accept my own lunacy in that way. However, most people aren't. Everyone hates this shit for a reason, and they do it as propaganda to try and make you think that you are alone. Why do you think they locked up the Jan 6 protesters? You are alone. No one is coming for you. You cannot dissent. We have ultimate power, and I really hope that's crumbling, and I think it is. The political hegemony seems to be crashing down.
Those that have jobs and lives are in some ways more useful than I am. I can talk to the niche people. I can create a platform of moralization and the truth on which you can then do things. But part of what people can do who watch me is they are integrated into wider society. They can go out there to their lives, to their jobs, and they can even just give little hints or slightly change the culture there to make sure that you're not. It's not just one perspective everywhere. And there's, no matter how dominating the ideological culture at your place of work or among your friends is, there's always something that you can do and say. If you're careful, that is part of winning. That is part of this. And it takes time. But we've all agreed as a society not to descend into civil war the moment something goes wrong. We've agreed to do things peacefully. Now, if that breaks down, I will not stop anyone from what needs to be done. But until it does, this is the way. You do it peacefully, you do it through culture, you allow it to happen gradually, you stay atop the cancer emotionally, you present yourself as an exemplar, someone who finds it easy to live with the beliefs that you have. Someone who does not need to constantly endure the cognitive dissonance of believing nonsense. Someone who is charismatic and confident and healthy with these beliefs. That's how you show people that, well, this guy seems better than the others, and they tend to follow you more. Now, the Spanish genetics changed as a result of that, but there are worse things. There are worse things, and it doesn't even have to be that way. In the UK, there is still plenty of British genetics left. It is still the majority, in fact. The Reconquista, given that society is moving so much quicker as well, that's the one I was thinking of, Libertine. The Reconquista can be a matter of deportation, and if they oppose us, then we will beef up the police or whatever it needs to be done. Because it can happen within a single generation. It doesn't even need to affect the genetics. So even if you're concerned about that, it doesn't need to happen. And everything our opponent's doing and everything the state of society leads you to be, if you're the kind of person that's blackpilled, is in pursuit of that. And it's in pursuit of you opposing the principles of Western civilizations, which are the best that have ever existed, specifically because that helps them. But never forget how quickly things can change in history. Never forget how surprising some changes can be. Never doubt that these things can happen. Those of you that are saying nothing ever happens, they won't be allowed to win, if you had been saying that 10 years ago, you would have been proven wrong a dozen times by now. And yet, here we are, and things are still moving perhaps faster than ever. So never lose faith. And if you choose not to lose faith, you have a much better chance of helping. The popular conservative movement of right now, I view it as largely a synthesis between the best ideas of the 20th century, those that really worked, the sort of 1950s ideal that you've seen in lots of imagery and propaganda and stuff, like the Restoration Bureau, that kind of thing. That's obviously before 50s, but the good stuff from the early to mid 20th century, plus trappings of modernity which are useful and needed, especially including social media. So I view it as a synth and meme culture. Hell, meme culture is one of the biggest parts of the popular conservative movement. So I do view it as a synthesis that is moving forward. But it's taking into account ideas of old, ideas that work, ideas that should be static throughout history. Honestly, the popular conservative movement of today is almost exactly what I would ask for. It's peaceful, it's principled, it respects the past, but it still synthesizes with the present.
Let's hope it's successful, because as I was talking to Benjamin Boyce about earlier, what seems to be the major issue with the right is that the left is just all power politics. They recognize that there is only truth but power. There's only truth and power. That's all they care about is power, power, power. The right, unfortunately, has this horrible thing called morality and ethics and principles, and that ends up getting us screwed over, I think, maybe in the short term. But maybe in the long time, ethics and morality will win out over power politics.
Yes, that's the point I was going to make, yeah.
Historically, that has not been the case. But
historically, it hasn't been the case because of absolute violence. The power politics perspective will tend to do that, and then during peacetime, your moral and ethical perspective will make more sense. But this is why I kind of like modern society over past, like distant historical societies, is that you can do this through peace, and thus truth has much greater power today than it has in the past. It doesn't seem like it, but I promise you it does, because we do it through peace.
Remains to be seen.
But then the enemy has the short-term advantage, and they've been constantly using it. But not just that, they have had such a colossal head start. Our movement didn't exist 10 years ago, but 10 years ago, they already controlled every institution of the Western world.
Yeah.
Well, but in just those 10 years, those 10 years, following the truth as our side predominantly does, we've gained so much ground. Even with all their attacks, their power politics attacks, power politics does not build. Whereas truth does. Truth and morality and ethics and principles build something that lasts. What we're building now, what we are building right now, is what society will look like when they're gone. And that will last. It will last 50, 60 years before something like that rears its ugly head again in a big way. Never give up, never surrender.
I hope. Yes, I agree with that. I used to be, like I said, I used to be more black-pilled, and I've realized I needed to stop doing that, because it's depressing, and that's the point. That's what they want. They want you to be black-pilled. They want you to give up. I hope that is correct. I think that there is power in that goes beyond their power politic into the metaphysical. This is again something I was talking to Benjamin about, which is that, look, every single culture on Earth, and you don't have to be a deist or religious to understand this, though, but every single culture on Earth has a religion, has a faith in something greater than themselves. So I think the ideas of morality, of ethic, that does go above the just the kind of, let's try to make everything balanced and equal so that we can do it on a scale the way the left does. It's which is very calculating and also incorrect at the same time, and clearly, obviously biased. I think that might be running its ground just because people want real ethic, real morality, not faux synthesized morality that, as the left portrays itself as
they want the ethics and morality and the traditions of evolution, the ones that have been constructed through billions of years of adjustment and adaptation to reality.
Exactly.
We always have that safe base to fall back on, to synthesize with the random, crazy nonsense ideas that have been tried from that base. It's very much the Orwellian pattern, I think. You get the constant swapping of who's the upper class and who's the middle class in terms of the side. But maybe that's too left-right focused. What I view is that the tradition is always there. It's always available, but we still have to reach into the dark and see what's out there. Even if the ideas that we're using to reach with are terrible, we still have to try new ideas. And through this process, the new ideas will become more common, more terrible, and more decayed. But the reason for that is it shows us what we need to fix. It shows us where we need to go next. And that, I think, is my example of the universe abhors stagnation more than it abhors corruption. It will use corruption to break stagnation. I think we were too powerful. And so in a sense, we stagnated. And that is it. We are too powerful. Our civilizations.
Rested on their laurels. Yes, rested on the laurels and then allowed themselves, because of doing so, to become corrupted.
Rome was too.
Yes, exactly. We
were too powerful. And so the fall of our complacency has been stronger this time. But the rapidity with which we've been able to recover restores my faith that this is not the Roman Empire, where if you study the culture of the Roman Empire, I haven't done it much, but what I've found was that they weren't as sort of flexible as we are today. They didn't seem to be as adaptive, culturally or individually. And I think the 2,000 years of societal evolution since then was to fix that problem. And now it has been fixed. And in just 10 years since the culture war went loud, we are on the road to victory. That resurgence, that movement has been built from nothing in 10 years.